Our Torah portion this week, before we do that, let's begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah, immersing ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. All right. This morning, our Torah portion is named Re'eh. It's an imperative form of the word see. It's the first word of the Torah portion. See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. It's in Deuteronomy 11:26. This reading contains admonitions to topple the Canaanite religious centers, warnings against idolatry, and prohibition on making sacrifices outside of God's holy temple. The place of the temple it's enigmatically, it's just kind of referred to as the place Adonai, your God, chooses from all your tribes to put his name to dwell. At that point, they didn't know it was going to be in Jerusalem. He just says, where I was going to put it in his name. And guess where the ark actually stayed for 400 years? In Shiloh. And it was there for a long time before God ever put his temple and his name in Jerusalem. So it was a long time coming. The portion goes on to warn against false prophets, reiterates the biblical dietary laws, and it introduces legislation regarding tithing, the sabbatical year of release, and the pilgrimage, the festivals. Now, my hat's off now to Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, okay, for some of these stories that I'm going to be telling you today, because he knows lots of stories, okay? And I really mourn his passing. He was quite a wise fellow, and I still do. I love to read some of his writings. He's a very astute, gifted man. So, on October 14th, 1663, there's a famous English diarist. We'd call him a podcaster today, but that's what they called him then. Samuel Pepys. He paid a visit to the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue in Church Lane in the city of London. Now, Jews had been expelled. We talked about this last week or so. Jews had been expelled from England in 1290. They were expelled, but, they just kind of went underground. They didn't really go many places because they didn't. And but in 1656, following an intercession by Rabbi Manasseh ben Israel of Amsterdam, Oliver Cromwell, the guy that was leading England at the time, concluded that there's really not a fact, there's no legal thing that would prohibit the Jews from living in England. So he didn't say, yeah, come on back. He just says, there's no law that says you can't live here. And so, for the first time since the 13th century, Jews were able to worship openly. Now, the first synagogue, the one that Pepys visited, was simply a private house belonging to a successful Portuguese Jewish merchant. His name was Antonio Fernandes Carvajal, and he had been extended, he had built onto his house. All right, a big house anyway, and then he just remodeled and he knocked out the garage and just built it up, and he put in a little synagogue. And they had a congregation there. So Pepys had actually been to that synagogue once before at the memorial service for Carvajal, who died in 1659. So this has been 4 years later now. He's come back to that synagogue. And the first occasion that he had been there was a memorial service. So it was kind of somber and decorous, and they would have said Kaddish and all of those different things. And what he saw on the second visit, though, was something else altogether. It was a scene of celebration that left him absolutely scandalized, the proper English and all of that kind of stuff. And so, and this is what he wrote in his diary. Now, I'm trying to have to put this stuff in It was written in Middle English, in that 16th century, 17th century English. So there's words there that I'll have to bring in. It says, after dinner, my wife and I, by Mr. Rawlinson's conduct to the Jewish synagogue. In other words, he was brought there by a Mr. Rawlinson, where the men and boys in their veils, their talits, the talitot, and the women behind a lattice, because they separated the men and the women in the synagogue, out of sight. And some things stand up, which I believe is their law in a press. Okay, what he saw was their law in the Aron HaKodesh, the ark. Okay, he saw their Torah scroll standing up in their ark, to which all coming in do bow, and at putting on their veils, their talits, do say something, to which others that hear him do cry, Amen. And the party do kiss his veil. Okay, what do? We put on our veil, we kiss the attar, and put that sort of thing. All right, their service all in a singing way and in Hebrew. And Anan, their laws that they take out of the press, out of the ark, are carried by several men. 4 or 5 several burdens in all, and 4 or 5 of them carried it in all, and they do relieve one another. And whether it is that everyone desires to carrying on it, I cannot tell. Thus they carried it around the room while such a service is singing and just rejoicing. But Lord, the disaster, the disorder, the laughing, the sporting, and no attention but confusion in all of their service, more like brutes than people knowing the true God, would make a man would make a man forswear ever seeing them more. And indeed, I never did see so much, nor or could have imagined there had been any religion in the whole world so absurdly performed as this. Poor Mr. Pepys. No one told him that the day that he chose to come to the synagogue was Simchat Torah. So yeah, we do have a lot of rejoicing. Nor had he seen a house of worship anything like the exuberant joy of the day when they're dancing around with the Torah scroll. All right? And so it was as if the world was a wedding and the book of the bride, and with the same abandon as King David when he brought the Holy Ark into Jerusalem. So they were having a good time. Simchat Torah. So the guy was absolutely scandalized, because if you've ever been to a high churchy service in the Episcopalian, or and so some we know here know all about the Episcopalian and the that high church stuff. And I went to one of those for 4 years when I was a cadet, because that's the way the Academy Chapel was. It was very, very high churchy and so forth. And it's very prim and proper, just like kind of like the English way of things, prim and proper. And so, yeah, this was a big departure from what he was used to. Now, joy is not the first word that naturally comes to mind when we think of the severity of Judaism as a moral code. Now, or the tear-stained pages of Jewish history. We don't think about joy. As Jews, we have degrees actually in misery, postgraduate qualifications in guilt, and gold medal performances in wailing and lamentation. That's who we are. Someone once summed up the Jewish festivals in 3 sentences. They tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat. Yet in truth, what shines through so many of the Psalms is pure, radiant joy, actually. And joy is one of the key words, actually, in the book of Deuteronomy. And the root word, which is, it's got a shin, mem, and a chet. It appears once in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. That root word is only once in those 4 books, but 12 times in Deuteronomy, in Devarim. So that old dry book of Devarim, just a repeating of the book of the law, it has 12 times the thing of joy, or the root word of simcha. And so actually 7 of those times are in our Torah portion just this week in Re'eh. Okay? So what Moses says again and again is that joy is what we should feel in the land of Israel, the land given to us by God, and the place to which the whole of Jewish life since the days of Abraham and Sarah had been on a journey. There was a long journey getting to that point. The vast universe with its myriad galaxies and the stars and God's work, and you know, it's a work of art, actually. And I never get tired of going outside on a clear night and just looking at the stars. You know, I spent many hours, days, months at sea, sitting on the deck or up on the bridge wing, just looking up at the stars and the sky. I just love it. I still do to this day. And you know, all of that, just whatever is planet Earth, and with that, the land of Israel and the sacred city of Jerusalem is where he was closest, where his presence lingers in the air. I mean, you can go to Jerusalem today, and it is a special place. If you've never been to Jerusalem and to Israel, please try to go. Put that on your bucket list, and please try to go, because if you do, it will change your whole life. It really will. There's just something special about it. And so, you know, finally, there in Jerusalem, Moses said, in the place the Lord your God will choose to place his name there for his dwelling, you will celebrate the love between a small and otherwise insignificant people and the God who is taking them on and lifted them up to greatness. Now, it will be there, said Moses, that the entire tangled up narrative of Jewish history would become lucid. It would become apparent to all, where a whole people, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, and your Levites from your town, who have no hereditary portion, we read that this morning with you, will sing together, worship together, celebrate the festivals together, knowing that history is not about conquest or empire, nor society about hierarchy and power, but commoner, and that the commoner and the king, the Israelite, the priest, are all equal in God's sight. You know, there's nobody special. You think you're special? You're not special. No, none of us are special, other than we're special to God because he gave his own son for us. So, you know, therein is where we are special. We're part of that holy choir of dancers. We had dancing this morning. We had singing this morning. And that's what, you know, that's what we should be doing, that joy of the Lord. And, you know, that's what the covenant is all about. It's a transforming of that human condition that what was Wordsworth, the poet, said he called that deep power of joy. And so Aristotle, now if you ever heard of Aristotle, he's supposed to have said that happiness is the ultimate purpose of human existence. Though we may desire many things, it's generally for the sake of achieving the primary goal of personal contentment. All right, there's such as a contentment and a situation, sentiment like that in Judaism, and the word is called happiness, ashrei. Okay, and it's the first book or first word in the book of Psalms. Did you know that? You look in Psalms, the first book, and it says, "Happy is the man." Who is the one who has not walked in the advice of the wicked, nor stood in the way of sinners, nor sat in the seat of scoffers. So that first word there in Hebrew is ashrei. Okay, it's happy. But far more often, the Tanakh speaks of simcha, which is joy. And, okay, if you look at Simcha, you're reading through something like that, S-I-M-C-H-A-H. Okay, so here's a little Hebrew word. It's not Simcha. Okay, Simcha. Get that? Simcha. Okay? Isn't that right? So that I make sure that I get my, I get a nod from the Hebrew teacher back there. Yeah, Simcha. All right, joy. And they're different things. Happiness is something that you can feel alone, really. You can be alone and you can be happy, content, so forth. But joy within the Tanakh is something that you share with others. For the first year of marriage, did you know what the Bible tells the husband he's supposed to do? He's supposed to stay at home and bring joy to the wife that he has married. I'll leave that up to your imagination. Yes, I am. Bringing first fruits to the temple. Deuteronomy 26:11. You will rejoice in all of the good that Adonai your God has given to you and to your house, you, the Levite, and the outsider in your midst. In one of the probably most extraordinary lines in the Torah, Moses says that the curses that befall the nation, not because they served idols or abandoned God, but says, because you did not serve your Lord, the Lord your God, with joy and gladness. Not that they were idolaters and they, did bad things. You quit serving the Lord with joy and gladness. So out of the, and it says, out of the abundance of all of your things. You let things come between you and God. A failure to rejoice is the first sign of decadence and decay. You ever think about that? There are other differences. Happiness is about a lifetime, but joy actually lives in the moment. We can be happy. I'm generally a happy guy. I get up in the morning and I keep saying this over and over again. I used to be able to get up in the morning without sound effects. But now it's, okay, crate, crack, okay. But guess what? As long as I'm uncomfortable and creaking and cracking, that means that I'm alive. It's a good day. Let's rejoice in that day, And so that's where we have to be. We can be happy, no matter what. Happiness tends to be kind of a cool emotion. That's just something that you're happy and you can, that's. But you know what? Joy makes you want to dance and sing. All right? Is that, am I bringing that across just because sometimes I'm happy, I'm pretty much happy most of the time, but every once in a while I will get into my woodworking shop and I will crank up something and I'm glad that nobody's watching because I can sing with, whoever and, and I have to admit, sometimes I sing with Creedence Clearwater Revival. And it's revival. So. And Abba, well, how about that, That's okay. Nice Jewish folks. They're not. But anyway, I can do that, and I can be happy, and I can be joyful over something. I'm working on something, and just get in that mood, Be joyful. And so... makes you want to dance and sing. Okay, maybe I'm not going to dance, but it's hard to feel happy in the midst of uncertainty. I admit that, but you can still feel joy. King David in the Psalms spoke of danger and fear and dejection and sometimes even despair, but his songs that he wrote in Psalms normally ended up in a major key, not a minor key. Okay, so they didn't end up. They went, ba-dum. That's the way they ended up. For his anger lasts for only a moment. His favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may stay for the night, but joy comes in the morning. You turned my mourning into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy. So my glory will sing to you and not be silent. Adonai, my God, I will praise you forever. Now, that's in Psalms 6 and 12 and 13. When we're serving Yeshua HaMashiach, joy is the supreme religious emotion, I think. You know, just being joyful. And here we are in a world filled with beauty, and, you know, just look around you. It's beautiful. This is a beautiful world. It really is. And every breath we breathe is the Spirit of God within us. You ever think about that? Every breath you take, God gave you that breath. And in fact, we have a prayer every morning that we're thanking God for what? Resurrecting us from the night of you know, that sleep, which is kind of like dead. And if it was me last night, yeah, I was dead, boy. I tell you what, after spending time with these guys back there and all the fun and frivolity, I finally laid my head down, and the next thing I knew is, this is my alarm clock playing Reveille for me. And I thought, no, it can't be. But it was. But I got up, and it was just a wonderful time. And like I said before, just the moon and the stars and watching that stuff, how can you not look up there in the sky and say, there is no God? Well, you'd just be crazy. That's all. And so we are here because God put us where we are supposed to be. You know, he doesn't make mistakes. God does not make mistakes. So you are here this morning because he wanted you to be here. And the soul that celebrates sings, you know. And, well, maybe we don't break out in a spontaneous song like in a Broadway musicals. Have you ever watched those Broadway musicals? And they're going along there, and somebody asks the guy, well, why do we do this? And he says, tradition, tradition, you know, and he goes off into a song. Well, we don't hardly ever do something like that, do we? No, I don't. Maybe you do. And yes, life is full of grief and disappointments. It's got problems and it's got pains. But under all of that is the wonder that, yeah, we are here in a universe, and it's filled with beauty among people who each of us carries within us a trace of, we got that little spark of God in our lives, okay? In Jewish teaching, that's one of the things that they talk about, is that each of us have that life spark in us, and I like that. Robert Louis Stevenson said that find out where joy resides and give it a voice far beyond singing, for to miss the joy is to miss it all. If you cannot be joyful, your life, you're going to just really have a hard life. And I don't get it when people express their faith. Tell you, I just don't get it. When they express their faith in dark, drab colors. Oh, my goodness. Yes, indeed. Lips that touch liquor have never touched mine. No, that's one of those things. Okay. And so, you know, when I was young, I can remember hymns and songs that were defeatist. You know, if any of you ever grew up in a Pentecostal background, you know, there are songs, you know, hold the fort for I am coming. It's a song of, I'm defeated and you know, we're not going out and conquering. We're just kind of holding in place until we somehow get rescued in the rapture. So it was a religion of denial and self-effacement and joylessness. Joyless. I don't know if that's a word or not. It didn't pop up when I was writing this. So in many Pentecostal churches of that day, you know, we're talking about 100 years ago when I was a kid, that there were times they would have a time for people to stand up and give a praise report or a testimony of what God had done for them. It's called, this is part of our testimony service now, you know, and if you've ever grown up in that, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, just take it. Okay. But I absolutely dreaded that time. I was embarrassed at that time because inevitably it was not a testimony of joy, but a litany of pain and struggle and just barely hanging on by the grace of God, you know, and just hated that because they missed the whole point. If you're going to stand up and give a testimony of, guess what? You know, I was sick this week, but God healed me. Or I needed this job, but God gave me a job. And all of those kind of things. And don't dwell on that other stuff, you know, because that is defeatist. We don't dwell on that. Dwell on the good stuff. Now, my grandfather, you've heard me talk about him, but he was by far the most godly man that I ever knew. Okay? And, you know, if Yeshua had lived to be 90 years old, and I'm sure that he and my grandfather would have looked like twins. Okay? He was a godly man. Everyone called him, everybody in town in Levelland, Texas, everybody in town knew him as Daddy Newt, because everybody would come out to the house, and, you know, half the high school and, you know, all of my parents' generation, and then later on, us grandkids, we could go to my Daddy Newt and Meemaw's house, and there was always food. My goodness. And I can still think of those sweet potatoes that she would take and slice them razor thin and just cover them with sugar and cinnamon, and it would, oh my goodness, it'd make you sick. Because you couldn't stop. But my Daddy Newt, that's what everyone called him, he was kind, he was gentle, and just downright funny. I mean, he was just a funny man. He had a gazillion stories about life, and most of them made you smile. And if not, roll on the floor laughing because it was just so funny, you know. And, of course, later on, as he got older, I have found that I do the same thing. I will tell a story, and the kids can finish it for me, you know, and they'll say, okay, you know, roll their eyes. And joy was his stock in trade. He was nothing but a poor cotton farmer. And, you know, that was what I was born into, was poor cotton farmers. And when I say poor, I mean we were, okay? And so, but guess what? This old poor cotton farmer, he was a rich and joyful human being. He exemplified by what is meant in Nehemiah 8:10, says, "The joy of the Lord is my strength." And I've been singing that song all week long. The joy of the Lord is my strength, you know. And I shouldn't have said that, because now if any of you grew up with that song, you're going to be singing it all week long, and you're going to hate me for it. Okay, but anyway, the joy of the Lord is my strength. In Messianic Judaism, faith is not a rival to science. And in an attempt to explain the universe, we don't take science. We can't explain the universe, and we can't take faith and explain the universe. I can't explain electricity. I know it does good stuff, and I also know it does bad stuff if you treat it wrong, okay? And do not ever stick a fork into a electrical outlet. It does not end well, okay? So, you know, I don't understand all that stuff, but, you know, it's part of our life. And this science and this world that we live in, it's got its own sense of wonder, and you know, and I feel a gratitude of just being alive. You know, I just love it. Our faith in Messiah is all about taking life in both hands, embracing it, and just make a blessing, make a baraka over your whole life. You know, just no matter what it is, God has given you a good life. It's as if God has said to us, I made all of this for you, this whole universe, everything, and this is my gift to you. Enjoy it and help others to enjoy it also. Wherever you can, heal some of the pain that people inflict on one another, okay? Or that 1,000 natural shocks that come from just being alive. Wherever you are, help somebody get through that. Because pain, sadness, fear, anger, envy, resentment, these are things that cloud your vision, and they separate you from others and you from God. Okay, that's why Paul said not in my notes, just hang on. And he says, whatever things that are good, those are the things that you think on. Don't think of all that old nasty stuff, you know, things that hurt you and hurt other people. Think about the good and dwell on those things. Kierkegaard once wrote, it takes moral courage to grieve. It takes religious courage to rejoice. Now, I believe that. So, you know, I'm moved, by the way, Jews all over the world who know what it is to walk through the valley of shadow of death. I mean, we've had a history of that, all of our generations. They still see joy as the supreme religious emotion. Every day we begin our morning prayers. If you do the morning prayers of Judaism, it's a litany of thanks. And there, that we're thankful that here we are where we are. We're thankful that God has resurrected us from that sleep. And thanking him that, okay, I've got family, I've got friends that love me. And it's about a day that you're starting out with all sorts of possibilities. You know, I have been blessed by thinking that way all my life, is that when I go to bed at night, I can't hardly wait. Of course, the older I get, the less I think this. But I used to think that sleeping was just a waste of time because it's keeping me from what I can do tomorrow, you know. And now I'm really enjoying that sleep, and I enjoy my afternoon nap. And you know, it's just different seasons in life. I understand that. But, you know, we've got that. We got to be thankful for all of those things. Look forward to that next day. Look forward to wherever God is going to put you with joy. Something that, yes, I can do this. We serve him with joy. We actually can channel God through our own joy. If that's, I know channeling people, and that's kind of weird stuff, you know. But I'm just saying that the Holy Spirit flows through us and into our relationships with other people. If we are joyful with other people, then they're going to smile. They're going to be joyful. If you're an old crank grumster, you know, you're not going to, you just can't, you know, you're not going to transmit joy to people. And joy helps heal wounds of our injured and our troubled world. So you may say this morning, I'm not feeling too joyful. You know, my joy meter is sitting on empty. Ever had those kind of days where, you know, you just, oh my goodness. Hey, it happens. But Yeshua had a solution for that. Now, he might have been thinking back to that day on the banks of the Jordan River when Moshe was telling Bnei Israel about the blessing that came from obeying God's commandments. What did he say? If you obey my commandments, you will be blessed. And he says, if you keep my commandments, Yeshua talking here, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be full. He wants our joy meter to be pegged all the way over to full. You know, that's the way he wants us to live. That's what we should be. If we are a believer, if we are a child of God, then we should not be like those people with the drab, you know, sour faces. My grandfather, I'll just end with one of the things he said. That he says, I don't know why anybody would want to be a Christian when it seems like that the measure of how godly you are is how you got such a long face, like a donkey. He used a different word, but like a donkey, you know, old long-faced donkey. He said, no, if you're a believer, then you should be happy. And he lived his life like that, joyful. Everyone that came around him he would lift them up. Just with a funny story, or I never, in all the years that I knew him, I never heard him say one bad thing about any one person, ever. And I mean, there were times I didn't experience it myself, but I've heard the stories about when they would be out chopping cotton, you know, weeding the cotton. Back in those days, you did it by hand. You didn't throw Roundup on it and stuff like that. You went with a hoe and you took the weeds out of the cotton crop. And the neighbor across the way there would take, you know, when the wind blows. If any of you have ever been from West Texas, you know what a tumbleweed is? You know, those great big old Russian thistles. Okay. And the neighbor across the way there, if the tumbleweeds would come up against his fences, which bordered my grandfather's fence, he would go out there and just throw those tumbleweeds over into my grandfather's cotton fields. And of course, tumbleweeds will destroy cotton plants when they start rolling, and they're heavy enough. If you've ever been smacked down by a big old tumbleweed, you know what I'm talking about, okay? And if you don't, then you don't want to know. But they will go up against the fence, actually, and get enough of them, and the wind blows, well, it'll knock that fence over. It will take a five-strand barbed wire fence and actually break the fence post over. And so he would come, and rather than gathering these things up and taking them off and burning them, he would just throw them over into my grandfather's side. And his kids, my aunts and uncles, they would say, well, Daddy knew, why don't we just take these things and throw them back over on his fence, in his yard, or his cotton field? And he says, why? Because two wrongs do not make a right. By you doing wrong, even though he did wrong, by you doing wrong, that's not the way we live. We always try to do what's right. And that was the guy. He was so funny and so happy. He was a good example of how to live the life of a believer and be joyful, even when it was kind of tough sometimes to figure out where the next meal was going to come from. Being an old poor cotton farmer, especially a dry land cotton farmer, where you had to rely on the rain, And so you may be just like an old poor cotton farmer, like my grandfather, but we can always carry the joy of Adonai in our hearts. We don't have to let the world defeat us. We shouldn't let the world defeat us, because we have the joy of the Lord, and the joy of the Lord is our strength. Could we stand this morning and close in prayer? Father, we just praise you. We thank you for all your blessings. We thank you that we can be happy. We can be joyful that you have given us joy. And that you said that if we would obey your commandments, then we would rejoice in our blessings. And you've actually told us to go and rejoice in our blessings, rejoice in our service, in our religion, as it were. You've told us to do that, and we just thank you for that you've told us to be joyful and not mournful, and that every morning our joy is renewed every morning. Father, I pray for each person that's here this morning, that you would help, that bring that Holy Spirit into their lives and give them joy, give them happiness.